All right. So, first of all, big welcome to the HSBC head office. I'm really very happy to have you here today. It's going to be a great event. We've got a few things that we will announce today. There will be as well a panel, and there will be a lot of interesting, insightful debates as well. My name is Kaz Killes-Kraus. I look after digital channels for HSBC Hong Kong. So you can also talk to me later about anything relates to our digital channels. I hope you are always using our mobile app. Obviously, I have to say that. And obviously today, with the focus on AI, we would like to deep dive a bit more with our exciting panel, but also I want to make sure that I introduce Lorena. Lorena, thank you for being today with us, and over to you. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you very much, Kaz. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank HSBC, the FinTech Association's Platinum member, for hosting us in this very iconic place. Although it's a bit foggy outside, I think you can still see this amazing city we all live in. So I'm Lorena Wang, the chair for the FinTech Association. And on behalf of the board and the association, I want to wish everyone a very happy, healthy, prosperous 2025. This is our first big event for the FinTech Association in 2025. And as a supporting organization to the AFF, we are very honored to be running this as a side event of the International Financial Week held by AFF in Hong Kong. Thank you for joining us today. Very full house, despite it being just 6 p.m. I was kind of half anticipating a half room. So clearly this topic draws audience, and we actually had to turn registration away. And today's topic, I think, is of growing importance as the pace of technological advancements in AI accelerates. Also, as we see increased adoption in the AI applications in financial services industry. We're lucky enough today to have regulators from HKMA and SFC joining us to share their perspectives as we navigate between innovation and the responsible use of AI. We have a very packed agenda today. Kaz was alluding to that earlier, and we'll be hearing many industry experts on this important topic. So let's dive straight in. First of all, please join me and welcome on stage Mr. Raymond Chan, JP, Executive Director, Enforcement and AML, Hong Kong MA, to deliver our opening remark. Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you, Lorena. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's event, which has been organized by the FinTech Association of Hong Kong in conjunction with the Asian Financial Forum. The topic of the event, AI regulation and opportunities for financial services in Hong Kong, is very timely and, of course, one close to the heart of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. The opportunities in AI have developed rapidly in recent years, and that pace shows no sign of slowing. AI is being adopted in a wide and increasing range of applications in financial services. So while some of you may be forgiven for thinking not another event involving AI, the shift by supervisors towards activities that stimulate, enable, facilitate change is important if the HKMA is to deliver on its mandate of promoting the stability and integrity of the financial system, as well as helping to maintain Hong Kong's status as an international financial center. And as part of this delivery, we firmly believe one of the key challenges is for both the public and private sector to keep pace with AI. The transformative potential of AI is such that it is incumbent upon us all to understand how systemic risks will evolve with this change. As the operating environment gets more complex, understanding the key vulnerabilities requires more and more cooperation, for example, between international regulators and also between the public and private sectors. AI is now used for an increasingly broad scope of applications. But if I may speak to my current area of responsibility, which is combating financial crime, the HKMA has for the past 5 years been running a technology uplift program, including periodic surveys of how banks are using technologies such as AI. Although the adoption of FinTech-related tools, I would say, has been fair and to good for most banks, the results for AI have so far been less than impactful. So we wrote to banks in September last year to ask the industry whether the technologies they are using remain fit for purpose, and whether they were using or considering deploying AI as part of efforts to make AML CFT's systems deliver better value, or put another way, more effective at targeting customers and transactions which represent real risks, while at the same time adopting a more proportionate approach for the rest. To this end, we have required banks with significant operations in Hong Kong to provide reports by the end of March regarding their plans in this area, and we will be supporting this work through a range of engagements throughout the year. You may ask me why we are taking such a proactive approach. The reason is because we believe AI may well prove to be a game changer in the fight against fraud. AI models can be dynamic, and they can update results automatically as the model learns from new data. And this is particularly important as scammers also use AI to try and stay one step ahead of us. Needless to say, the use of AI is associated with challenges. A particular challenge is around explainability and the need to understand the relationship between input and output data. A further challenge is the breadth of data required, which is at a different scale compared to traditional financial risk models. And this is often cited as a major hurdle for smaller banks. A final challenge I would include is the need to make sure the people at the center understand and possess the necessary skills and capabilities to support such an approach. So if you are anything like us, then the pace of technological advancement will challenge your knowledge. And events like the one this evening are most welcome, and my profound thanks to the FinTech Association of Hong Kong for the work it is doing and the invitation to me to join the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, identifying and understanding opportunities as well as systemic risks is at the very core of designing effective and purposeful policies and regulation for the financial system. Understanding novel risks requires constant knowledge building and skill set updating for policymakers and regulators like myself. I will stop with this note, and I look forward to benefiting from your sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. Very encouraging to hear a regulator take such a collaborative and open approach. Next, please join me in welcoming Mr. Henry Tang, Director, Intermediaries, SFC, to deliver the opening remarks. Henry.
Thank you, Lorena. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see so many of you at today's event here on AI regulation and opportunities for financial services in Hong Kong. AI has become such an important and integral part of the financial services sector in Hong Kong. Traditional AI and machine learning models have been used for many, many years. Okay, so we know that, for example, banks use it in part of their algorithmic trading, asset managers use it as part of their investment decision-making processes, and robo-advisors use it to provide investment advice. As a securities market regulator, the SFC welcomes the responsible use of AI. We recognize the many benefits that AI brings. But as with any technology, there are also potential risks and issues associated with the use of traditional AI, some of which Raymond has already mentioned, such as the lack of transparency, bias, cybersecurity risks, and operational resilience concerns. Now, the appearance of generative AI introduced even more opportunities, but and also new risks on top of those posed by traditional AI. So, for example, traditional AI does not suffer from this novel phenomenon of hallucination. This is when the generative AI can produce credible sounding answers which are in fact wrong. Now, given the novelty of generative AI and the additional risks that they presented, the SEC thought it would be prudent to issue some guidance to the industry on their use. And of course, we wanted to strike the right balance between protecting investors and the market and also encouraging the industry to innovate and adopt AI. So after all, AI has a key role to play in the financial services sector, and having well thought out principle-based regulation is important for Hong Kong to maintain its status as an international financial center. So that's why in November last year, the SFC issued a circular on the use of generative AI language models to set out our regulatory expectations and to give out some guidance around 4 key areas. Essentially, they revolve around senior management responsibilities, AI model risk management, cybersecurity and data risk management, and last but not least, third-party provider risk management. Now, does that mean the work of the SFC is finished? Unfortunately not. Firstly, regulators across the globe are closely monitoring the developments in AI and the risks that they pose. So, for example, the SFC participates on IOSCO's FinTech task force, which has an AI working group looking into the issues, risks, and challenges presented by emerging AI technology through the lens of market integrity, financial stability, and investor protection. Secondly, as Raymond has already alluded to, AI is such a rapidly evolving field, and it's important that we as regulators continue to engage with industry to understand the latest situation, including the state of AI adoption, any emerging themes or trends, as well as any issues or challenges that firms may be facing. We will, of course, continue to monitor developments in Hong Kong and other jurisdictions and keep in view the need to issue additional guidance to industry. So that's why today's event, organized by the FinTech Association of Hong Kong, is so important and so timely. Through this dialogue, we hope to raise industry awareness around the various issues and also to facilitate the responsible adoption of AI. Okay. So I look forward to a very interesting panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Henry. Sounds like our regulators have been very busy in this field. So what can we do? Today is actually a very exciting moment. A lot of the FinTech Association's board have been looking forward to. We at FinTech Association Hong Kong pride ourselves in community building, and we take our role of advocating, collaborating, and educating everything FinTech very seriously. To do that, we need the power of the community. And we've always had AI as a key theme in the association. In fact, AI and Big Data Committee is one of our 8 committees since the inception of the association 8 years ago. However, since last year, you've seen how busy the regulators have been and the industry have been. We feel this needs some more focus. And AI is not vertical. I think we can all agree on that. Instead, it encompasses everything that we do in the FinTech space. This is why we have invited some of the most brilliant minds and practitioners from our member base and formed the AI Strategic Advisory Council. The council, let me bring the next slide. The council will be responsible to uncover and surface challenges and opportunities in adopting AI. Both Raymond and Henry were talking earlier about finding the right balance. That came out a lot. And also, you talk about hearing the industry view. So this is the industry view we hope we'll be able to put forward, balancing risk control and innovation. The 10 council members will serve a 1-year term, and they come from key players in FinTech in Hong Kong, ranging from banks, asset management, academia, tech companies, professional services companies. The council is expected to work in close collaboration with the FTA board to shape the future of AI in Hong Kong's financial services industry. We have the key objectives here. So, without further ado, it's with great honor that I announce the official launch of the inaugural FTA HK AI Strategic Advisory Council. And I'd like to introduce and invite the council members to join me on stage. Chris, unfortunately, is not in Hong Kong this time. So let's start with Guillaume, Director at Accenture Financial Services. Sarah, Director, Head of Digital Growth and Cards and Unsecured Loan Sales. Add on to your busy schedule in the council. Miles Wan, CEO, Fanolab. Is Miles here? Oh, okay. Julian, Regional COO, Amundi. Welcome. I can never attempt to pronounce his full name, so welcome, Kaz. Managing Director, Head of Digital Channels, HSBC. Gary, Cloud Solutions Architect, Global Financial Services Solutions, Alibaba Cloud. Vivian, Head of Central Compliance, Bank of East Asia. Oh, maybe we can also extend a bit here. Ashley Ma, Head of Customer Propositions Analytics, DBS. Last but not least, one of our board members, Brian, Founding Executive Director, Light Lab HKU. Okay, may I invite Raymond and Henry join us on stage to take a picture to mark this launch? Okay. Okay, thank you. And before that, I would like to invite Sarah to represent the council and say a few words. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Raymond and Henry. Thank you. So as I think we have heard from our guests earlier, these days, my name is Sarah. Okay, I'm from City, Hong Kong. And on behalf of the council members, I just want to share a couple of a few words. So these days, you have heard the application of AI is actually ubiquitous, right, across all industries. And if we have witnessed over the last year, we have seen the AI accelerating the creation of new products and services. So it's almost certain that AI will become a mainstream tool in the near future. Be it automating routine tasks, streamlining operation tasks, or just enabling employees to focus on higher value activities. I think that is to come. It's almost certain. So with this establishment of the AI Strategic Council, what we'd like to do is coming together collectively as a group from different banks, FinTech associations, or players. I don't know so much about the brilliant minds, but we'll do our best. We're coming together to firstly uncover the potential of AI, and how do we really harness it, right? And secondly, how do we actually identify the challenges and work together, collaborating across the industry, and find solutions? And thirdly, how do we share best practices from outside of Hong Kong to Hong Kong, and sharing our best practices from Hong Kong to beyond Hong Kong, right? We are an international finance hub. right? So I'm really excited, so thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward, I would say we look forward to this collaboration with our regulators, with our industry partners and our peers, for us to uncover this mission. And I'm sure with our collective effort, we can foster innovation and I would say supercharge the FinTech ecosystem, right? And I hope that will make Hong Kong shine. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Well said. Definitely brilliant minds. Okay, so the packed agenda now moves to our third and last agenda item. We've got further brilliant minds, but I'm going to hand over to the moderator, Brian, who will bring us into a very vibrant and fruitful discussion with our panelists. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so very much for that, Lorena. Can my kind panelists come and step forward to their seats, which are quite high up, so no skirts today. It's all okay, good. For male or female, either fine, right? So as our panelists take their seats, you will note that we try to be as diverse as we can in terms of composition, because the FinTech Association is very diverse, as is our membership. And frankly, in the issue of AI, we need as many different perspectives in relation to addressing this complex and fascinating and growing area. So perhaps I can just briefly go down the row here, as if everybody could briefly introduce yourselves in one line. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rocky Mui. I'm a lawyer, so a partner of Clifford Chance in Hong Kong, and I lead our Hong Kong FinTech practice and also financial regulatory practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Hello, I'm Guillaume Huet, Director of Financial Services at Accenture, and also board member at the FinTech Association and former co-chair of the AI and Big Data Committee.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jia Hao. You see a very long title. We can have a challenge on a tongue twister. Who can pronounce it faster? But in short, as I told Brian, I lead the AI program for HSBC globally for the consumer and wealth business, and also in Hong Kong.
Hi everyone, Gary Sian here. In short, I look after our international financial services solutions practice based out of Hong Kong. Also the ex-co-chair of the Cloud and Cybersecurity Committee for FinTech Association, Hong Kong.
I'm Sally from the Hong Kong Investment Funds Association. Long time with the association, it's like an old piece of furniture gathering dust and still paper-based.
Well, thank you also very much. Again, as you can see, quite diverse. And for those that don't know me, my name is Brian Tang. My background is as a lawyer in what was then Credit Suisse. Fast forward in FinTech, RegTech, and I used to co-head the RegTech committee, which is how, of course, allowed us to work closely with our regulators, the HKMA and the SFC, on the different initiatives. And so that's why we're so pleased to have both of you join us here today. And now I teach at Hong Kong U. I lead Light Lab, Law, Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship. I think it's really important that here in Hong Kong we need as many good reputable institutions to represent us around the world in these more challenging geopolitical times, shall we say. Now, along the line of AI, many moves are afoot. One of the real impetus of us coming together here is, besides what's happening around the world, our regulators have actually introduced some great new initiatives in relation to Hong Kong. And as you may have heard, part of the role of regulators, not just to regulate to protect the consumers, but also to promote good practices and innovative practice. It's a balancing act. With that, maybe we'll start with the lawyer, Rocky. So Rocky, could you please briefly kind of give an overview of some of the recent regulatory initiatives here in Hong Kong in particular, and comparing the different approaches from some of our regulators here? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So I think for comparison, I think we should put things in context and look at where Hong Kong stands globally. So really quickly, from a global perspective, with different approaches from different jurisdictions. So for example, we have the EU, the very famous AI Act. It's a very comprehensive piece of legislation specifically on AI. We then have the UK, which is more context-based, so pretty much riding on pre-existing regulatory framework. It then gives empower regulators to issue more specific guidelines on sector-specific basis. we'd have the US, so it's slight difference between the federal level and the state level, where the state level have more specific regulations coming out for AI. Coming closer back to home, mainland China, we see more specific regulations on particular sector or areas where it came from. And for Hong Kong, I see we are more on the context-based approach. So we don't have specific AI legislation, not like the EU. We use pre-existing regulatory framework, and then we see different regulators issuing specific guidelines, circulars, and expectations, not only HKMA and the SFC, but also other regulators, and also the data commissioner and the government policy committees as well. So that's where kind of Hong Kong stands. And I think one common theme we have is we do, although we have different guidelines, regulation coming out, we do have a kind of a consistent thinking, a common theme as to where we sit overall in Hong Kong. A classic example is if we look at the government policy statement, then we have the common themes, common standard, principle-based thinking. All the regulators, the rules, the guideline I see coming out, they already think about similar common themes, whether it's governance, transparency, fairness, those type of areas. So there's this principle-based concept. And there's also this risk-based approach. So from different papers and guidelines, it's also specified this risk-based approach in terms of AI regulation, which is I think, very welcome approach for the industry itself. Now, then we go into the specific, obviously different regulators looking at different sectors with different practices. The MA, then we see starting, I think, from 2019, there's the high-level AI principle that came out. And then over the years, there's more specific circular guidelines around consumer protection, transaction monitoring, for example. And then last year, of course, we have the AI Sandbox, and of course, Alibaba Cloud and HSBC in the first cohort. And the SFC, I think, is the regulatory principles is there. So the actual risk for the securities market, I think the practices is the existing framework. It's already governed, and it's consistent with IOSCO thinking and recommendations from that perspective. So then came the circular last year, which sets out the expectation on how the licensed corporations should comply with the pre-existing framework. So that's kind of the general thinking, and of course the list goes on with different industries and sectors as well. So I think that's the overall approach. Is we do have a consistent thinking, at least from a Hong Kong Inc. perspective, but that's the regulatory approach in terms of depending on context sector, then we have specific thoughts.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Rocky. And one of the reasons why I was so happy to have both Raymond here, to share was because the HKMA, besides some of the initiatives you had mentioned, actually has a little bit of a stick as well in terms of asking the banks to please give us your plans for the future. So suddenly the banks have to actually start thinking about that. So I think that's kind of quite an innovative kind of policy approach in relation to this. And of course, Henry in the SFC has actually issued some new guidance for the regulators. But we here in Hong Kong, we're more similar to the US than, say, Singapore or the UK, where there's a single regulator. A lot of our members and the banks and financial institutions, they're regulated by both of you, and also sometimes the IA as well. So we have that. So that's why it's so important for us to have that mutual dialogue across the board. So let's now hear a little bit from the industry in terms of the industry kind of reactions to some of these new initiatives and new guidances from our regulators. Maybe we can start with the asset management industry. So Sally, would love to hear what you and your members are saying and thinking. Thank you.
Probably we can go through with you the journey that we have had with Henry in the past year or so with respect to this November circular, the very important circular governing the AI usage in the fund management industry. To be frank, when the SFC first engaged the industry through soft consultation to see how to approach it and come up with the draft circular, immediately this evokes the memory of EDSP, which for the industry is something very, very burdensome and onerous. Sorry about that, Henry. And through this exercise, we have been doing a lot of, discussion and relaying the concerns of the industry as to why the draft circular on AI does not really work. For example, the requirements about putting the onus on the compliance people. And the L&C people are saying that, well, I don't have the expertise. How can you single me out to put the responsibility for me to challenge or to really review the design of the system? I'm not in a position. That's not in my job brief. So there are a lot of back and forth. And also, in addition, a lot of firms, because a lot of our member firms are global firms. And the center of excellence of AI is not really in Hong Kong. They're at the receiving ends. The whole design is housed, for example, in London or other places. So if you are going to impose this system in Hong Kong virtually, it means that it will affect the global operation. So we have a lot of discussion with Henry. And in fact, thanks a lot, Henry, for your team, because you've done an excellent job in talking to the industry, working and understanding our pain points, and see how to pragmatically implement and transpose the IOSCO principle. And one thing that probably in future, maybe we can think about, when we study this whole arrangement, a lot of these are transposed from the IOSCO principles. But we always assume that the IOSCO principles are really global baseline. We just take that as it is. But when through this exercise, I pause through the IOSCO principles. Some of these are not really so robustly developed. For example, this idea of having the compliance people to take on this responsibility goes back to the IOSCO principle. And how does IOSCO come up with this principle? In fact, it's based on one respondent's feedback. So there's something that we probably, in future, when we look at the IOSCO principle, we need to see it with a pinch of salt before we transpose that to the local jurisdictions, because it affects all the jurisdictions. So I think that we have to be very careful at the international level what we are trying to advocate. And back to Hong Kong, fast forward to November, Henry and his team come up with this circular. Basically, I think from the industry, it's a great relief, because it's much more pragmatic. It allows firms to leverage on the global expertise and resources. I think that is a major breakthrough. And it also does not really single out a particular function. It highlights the important role of multidisciplinary approach to the whole setup and design. So I think basically, when you talk to our members, we ask them, do you have any questions, concerns? Basically, by and large, much more comfortable. But we will come back to you, Henry, because there's still questions. And in discussing the questions, I will have a last point probably we can talk about, is that how to strike the balance between prescriptiveness as well as more guidance. Because, for example, on one topic, there's some members saying, oh, you should definitely go to Henry and ask for more guidance. But there are other members saying, no, it doesn't work. So Henry, you have really a very difficult job, but please be rest assured, I will come back to you on those questions. Thanks again, Henry.
Thanks for that color, Sally. I think you raised a couple of interesting points. The first is the global aspect of this, right? So even if our regulators regulate AI, guess what? Others are doing it in a different way. How do we ensure that Hong Kong is on the one hand competitive, but on the other hand still protecting our citizens here? So, I mean, I was last month at OECD, and it was very interesting there in the lead up to the Paris Summit for AI. So they're looking at regulating AI and AI safety, not just in finance, but across the board. So there's so many things happening globally. I think we need to find ways to connect with those trends. The second thing you mentioned is the role of association. So you've been really great with your members. And again, similarly with the FinTech Association, we're hoping to actually engage more with you in relation to some of that feedback, because sometimes, as you know, the members don't want to I don't want to see Henry. It's not me. You guys go see Henry, right? And they're like, sorry to pick on you a little bit, Henry. But again, as you've heard, this has been the consultations and the role of associations is so valuable. Now, moving along, so we start with asset management. If we can go now to banking and our host here, Tia Hua, I would love to hear your thoughts in relation to, from a banking perspective and reaction to.
Sure. So as the host, welcome again to HSBC. Honored to host, many great minds, having a lovely, lively dialogue with lots of expertise today. So I'll speak more from a practitioner point of view in terms of running the program for about 2 years now, since the world went crazy, generative AI went on steroids. I think HSBC in particular is proud to call Hong Kong home and co-shape, the future of banking, innovation in banking in Hong Kong, in strong partnership with our regulators. And in particular, we appreciate the balance between a principle-based approach with the risks that are associated, and some of them we call out in the recent circular, which was helpful. In particular, a tangible initiative of having the sandbox, and we can touch more on the details later, but HSBC is going to be one of the primary participants there to really shape not just actually use case standards, but technical standards, because you have an environment where we shape sort of, the design and the architecture. So that's really, I think, something that will help us get ahead and define, what we're doing. I think in HSBC, we are extremely serious about AI, been investing heavily in data analytics and the infrastructure for a number of years now. And in 2020, we were one of the first banks globally to issue our data and AI ethics globally and publicly around how we guide ourselves. So a principle-driven and AI ethics-driven, responsible AI approach is something that resonates quite heavily with us. Now, internally, and hopefully also resonating across industry as we shape this together, and we really see it's a mutual discovery. It's not a one-horse race in this aspect, especially with generative AI. We've really identified 3 areas that are quite key to how we approach, the entire evolution. And in HSBC, we believe to be really, the framework has to be technology neutral, so that we're open and we are a hub, and we are quite a hub of connectivity, and we should be open across all the different stacks and possible technology providers that are coming along. We should be open and evaluating. The second, which I'll probably emphasize the most, is risk-based in approach. And as I mentioned, HSBC has been extremely serious about taking a foot forward and wanting to be a leader in this space. So as I run, the internal temperature around the conversation of AI in just especially the last couple of months has gone from exploratory, innovation, shiny and great, and let's have a workshop around it, into now how do we get into production at scale? And that's something that we really then need to go towards setting clear risk-based parameters in partnership with our regulators to define what are the extreme outlier boundaries that we will not touch as an industry, and that's great guidance, and that's off the guardrails, and what are areas that we are confident, at least in the near term, and obviously it keeps evolving, to shape together and to be exposing the benefit of AI in specific areas of banking that we deem to be low or acceptable risk on. So this risk-based classification is something that HSBC is developing internally as well. What's an algorithm, what's a model, what's something that can hallucinate versus something that we feel comfortable with the right supervision and humans involved, we are good to go. And then of course the third would be outcome driven. So again, we don't have unlimited funding and resources, so we have to be prioritizing as an industry into areas where we think that would be the biggest impact. So we really think that the thinking and the framework is being shaped right now, and we look forward to evolve with the regulator, and I'm very happy to have this conversation with everyone. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so very much for that, Tia Hao. And the nice thing about being in your house is I actually see lots of HSBC friends here. We've got somebody from the technology side, somebody from the legal side here. So we know that it's all working together in terms of your...
I was going to say I can pass on to any questions that anyone might have. We have everyone here to be able to answer.
Exactly. So thanks so much. So now, again, we wanted to turn to all the different parts of financial services, and Guillaume is a consultant, so he will tell you that he acts for all parts of the financial services, but today he's kind of going to wear a little bit of the insurance hat to give some views in terms of what his insurance clients are saying in relation to
Pleasure. I'm used to say and joke about the fact that before ChatGPT I used to have hair, and things have changed, but
it's true. So I'm kidding.
And so, I can almost copy-paste what Jiahao said on the insurer's perspective, but I might be slightly more outspoken because IA is not in the room today. So, jokes apart, everyone is on the starting block. Everyone looks at AI as a great opportunity, great potential. We know in insurance that there's a lot of expectation in improving the speed of management of claims, underwriting, but also fraud management. All verticals of the value chain are potentially impacted. The question is obviously how to do it correctly, how to do it responsibly. You alluded to the fact that there's inspiration to be taken from around the world, from other locations, but obviously there's been some significant steps taken already in Hong Kong. But one of the challenges that I see in this exercise is the fact that there's obviously location bias, the fact that, EU has a specific perspective, but particularly when the EU AI Act was published, it was already obsolete because ChatGPT was not considered. Nobody saw this coming. And so they had to make an update. But when the update came, there was already some new performance levels that were totally unexpected with what's called emergent abilities, which was something that was even a surprise for researchers. And the speed at which the technology is evolving creates a challenge for the researcher, for the practitioners, but also for the public and even more for regulators. I'll give you two examples. If you are considering, for example, regulating the origin of a specific large language model that's used in the use case, how are we going to work when the core, I would say, our architecture that's being implemented now is agentic architecture leveraging multiple models from various locations in the world and various, I would say, manufacturing or build technology. You may have nowadays models that are used for summarization on the part of the same conversation, in the same chat discussion, other flows that are going through models that has been built in China. Others that may be used or specific for the mathematical or reasoning. So this is one of the challenges. But I would say one of the challenge to have in mind, and insurers are also trying to catch up with this, is that the AI that we are really aware of is the one that was built 2 years ago. The state of the art that's been released a few weeks or months ago, like the reasoning models, the O1, nobody's using it yet, but it's coming next. So how to build frameworks that anticipates what's coming next? And we know that it's not anymore a myth. AGI might be next on this wave. Speculations go for 1 year or 2 years ahead, but that's on the road. So we need to build a flywheel in terms of perceptions of understanding of these technologies to manage what exists, make it, I would say, build it safely, but also catch up and follow on the wave there. I'm going to pause here, but I think this is an important point to have in mind. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much for that, Guillaume. So for those that are not, day in, day out following AI, the word that you'll look out for this year is agents and agentic AI. I was just at the Microsoft AI tour that was held all of today, and they were full force in terms of showing what was done. In fact, one of the demos was how they can use it in the insurance space, from front to back, a lay person asking questions and then getting and sending photos and then getting a report in relation to whether the claims assessment and the like. So agentic, watch out for that for those who are not following this space a lot, but those of us who are, we're all actively looking into it already. So now you've heard a little bit bit from the financial institutions perspective, we'd like to turn over to the vendor side, right? So Gary, again, you hear about these AIs, and unless you're one of the large banks, often you're actually building wrappers, or you're building on top of other people's models, to be honest. Some of the larger banks and other institutions now, because of open source, are creating their own models and their own products. But Alibaba, we're very glad to have you here, Gary, to get your perspective. We're pleased to see that you're one of those listed for the Sandbox, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. But what are you seeing and hearing from your clients? We've had this cloud discussion for a while. We're trying to get a lot of financial institutions more on the cloud, and it's a journey because of the requirements for third parties, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts there. Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess my perspective would be more from how do I contain the excitement, right? And actually turn it into actionable implementations, right? That's actually going to make a difference operationally within the financial services. I call it the operating environment. I think that is actually the largest challenges, right? So how do you turn what I call the forever POCs, right, into actually, benefits, no matter it's in productivity gain, no matter it's in sales and services, right? How do I make more money or prevent more risk from happening? Now, I'm very fortunate that Alibaba as a company have made a public statement already late last year, is that there will be continuous investment, and our CEO even used the word unprecedented investment into AI. And this is across beyond the cloud, right? Alibaba as a group of business. Now, of course, cloud has the responsibility to then support that strategy. And I think the relationship of AI and cloud, I think it's quite interesting because if I sort of look at the demand that are coming from the industry, both in Hong Kong and beyond, sort of the nearby Southeast Asia country, banking is definitely leading the way in terms of activities that are happening, right? The engagement, followed by insurance and capital markets. But of course, there's also what I call sort of the broader FinTech landscape there. But what actually that translates into is then a very practical issue then comes up. A lot of customers, they want to use, quote unquote, the best models out there, right, in the market. Now there's a price to pay, both in terms of, do you actually have access to the computational resources, right? Very practical. We work with one of the note issuing banks, not HSBC in this case, in what I call sort of, let's just call it a intelligent document processing kind of scenario, right? So basically, how do you have an agent, for example, to help the bankers to read 9,000 publicly listed stock exchange financial reports? Now, we recommended in a tech terms, a so-called 72 billion parameter model, for example. But then they're like, we don't have enough GPUs. But for this particular bank, at this moment, they weren't able to leverage under their risk framework currently to leverage the public cloud GPU. So they're like, oh, this is just, so what I've got is X amount of GPUs. So we're like, all right, maybe we'll try to make the 14 billion parameter model work. So this is actually very practical. And then we're like, so when can you get more? Oh, 12 months, maybe 6, if we're lucky, right? So this sort of comes back down to, without the cloud, you can still access, right, the computation, but then you need to, then the planning comes into play, right? So how do you then balance the time to market versus, actually I call it the supply chain issue. I was with Bank Negara this week, so Central Bank of Malaysia, and we talked about this actually. So Malaysia recently announced that they want to be one of the regional, what we call AI data center hubs, right, in the region. And they're actively funding it. They're talking to NVIDIA, obviously, trying to acquire chips. We know one of the companies that's responsible for building that, and they said, Gary, NVIDIA said 6 months, now it's not 9 months, now it's 12 months. So literally, as the supply chain issue have now deferred, right? It's completely derailed to some extent the plan that they had. So So then you sort of then bring it all back to balancing. Look, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of requirements, there's a lot of demand, there's a lot of want, they want to land it, but then all of a sudden, not every bank or every financial institutions have actually thought through and say that for me to make that real, right? Let's just say I've got something I really like from the sandbox, I want to turn it real. Initially, thanks to Cyberport, they first leveraged the Cyberport computational power, but then they just realized, oh, actually, my supply chain from my own, let's just say you need to land it back into your own data center, it's actually not available. So what do? What is the risk, right? The risk of using the cloud, for example, versus the risk of not actually making it happen, right? Because we talked about risk-based decisions, risk-based appetite. Now, I flipped that dial a little bit, right? Because of course, we've got AML representative here. So if we think about AML, so fraud, right? Deepfake. You can almost say, thanks to the advancement of generative AI, there's a lot more deepfake. The cost of fraudsters performing deepfake is far cheaper than previously. I think Hong Kong is still relatively fortunate at this stage. I work very closely with, for example, the Indonesia market, and I'll just give you this example, right? 2 months ago, Friday night, near midnight, I got a phone call, Gary, in 2 hours, I've had 10,000 accounts opened with my bank. All deepfake. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Let's see what we can do. So we were fortunate that we had the capability, and because they were using a cloud-based solution, we were able to switch it on at that time. Now you can imagine, if there was an on-premise solution, even if I wanted to switch it on at that time, just to go through the bank's, let's just call it the emergency change governance process, could have been, let's just call it hours, right? Let's just assume they can get everyone on the phone at that time. And then Monday morning, another bank called me and said, Gary, I'm getting attacked because the same fraudsters who got blocked because we made the change on a Friday night are now attacking the next bank. So we repeated, we switched it on. Then the third bank got hit. So it's just a matter of time. I see it in Philippines, Malaysia, Hong Kong, there are definitely pockets of attacks that are happening. The attack vectors may not be as severe currently, but I call it's like termites. If today you are seeing one case of deepfake in your organization, the chances are there'll be quite a few, right, after your review. So I guess sum it all back up, absolutely demand through the roof. But as interesting coming from a vendor's point of view, I've been advising customers to think more prudently and think about the value of the creation from AI, and then come and invest with us. And of course, we will try to do what we can to make that. I think it's actually turning some of the use cases that have never been even considered about, right? Agentic model, multi-agent, multi-expert model. And what does that actually mean? It means that if a bank has got 3 lines of defense or front, middle, back office, we literally have the ability now to have AI agents performing part of those functions, right? But the ultimate goal, of course, is still to help people to make better decisions. There are no intent there to, I guess, there's a lot of, our customers always got a lot of concerns. Is it going to replace? And I'm like, no, because if you look at the Oxford's dictionary of what is, if you break artificial intelligence into artificial and intelligence, artificial is created by human. Intelligence is the ability to acquire knowledge. So what I said to them is, AI is actually helping you to acquire knowledge in a much quicker way than you've never thought of. So keep using that to drive your decisions based on your risk appetite, and only then you will be successful with your AI implementation.
Thanks so much, Gary. You reminded us that cybersecurity is even more important these days, as AI can be used for good, but also by the bad guys, right? And then the other thing with POCs, I think a lot of people now are focusing, it's great that we have POCs to learn and try new things, but especially those of us who are from industry, we want POVs, right? Proof of value, right? We want to actually get it done and implemented. So now let's take a step away from some of that, and maybe let's look at some of the great use cases and priority use cases that each of you are seeing in the different industries. Maybe we come back to you, Sally. So in asset management, of course, your members were very keen and interested to know about the new rule. So what are the kinds of use cases have you heard that they're most interested in applying these AI, especially Gen AI?
I think to different extents they have been being applied in different functions within the value chain, from front, middle, back offices, and even for investment management. But I think the approach is rather nuanced, is that based on some surveys by Mercer as well as IMF, if we look at the usage in the investment management function, if it is for supplemental functions, for example, provide analytics, gathering information, to identify more indicators for the industry or market trends, they have been used quite commonly amongst the industry. But when it comes to the more core part, the meaty part about really asset allocation, trading execution, that still primarily relies on the individual, the human element. So I think we have to take really a much more nuanced approach as to how these function, how these tools are being deployed. And this also goes back to how the regulatory framework will be structured, because a core part of the SFC circular is about the risk-based approach, very principle-based, and they in particular highlight high-risk use cases. And here, I think the industry has been, I think even for banking or insurance industry, will be discussing as to how that would be applied factually, because under the SFC circular, the high-risk use case primarily relate to if you are going to provide investment advice, research, recommendations to individual investors or clients. But the point is, where do you draw the line? Does that mean that these activities only are related to those that you have direct interactions with the end investors, and the activities are performed by licensed persons? Or how about further down the chain? Because a lot of these materials are provided through internal processes, research, and all those. So does that mean that at some point, these activities, which are supposed to be internal, for example, research reports generated for the portfolio managers, will these inadvertently be called as high risk? So I think these probably will be discussed by other sectors as well as to how you define as high risk. So the extent how AI will be used in the whole value chain really goes back to the regulatory framework. And this is something that we need to work very closely with the regulator.
Great, thank you. Again, for those of us who are involved in that space, it is a value chain, right? So way back in the beginning of FinTech, they talk about robo-advisors. Remember that, right? Not quite, right? That what we're seeing, but how are we? But parts of AI is being used as part of that value chain. So presumably not directly facing the client, because clients still want to hear from humans, but what part and how that's regulated. So I think that's an ongoing discussion, debate. Thank you. So what about banking? You're very excited, Tia Hao. So what aspects in your coverage are you seeing and excited and prioritizing?
Actually, maybe I'll cheat with answer. I think my response is the human impact, because where there are humans, and I think Gary touched on it, that's where the intelligence has the potential to augment and accelerate, and that's very much how we are focused around implementing AI, where there are big pockets of staff who can benefit. A couple of months ago, I was privileged to spend some time in a room with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. He spent an hour with a small group of us, and I really was inspired by his vision of the future. And he's not talking about banking or finance specifically, but he was talking about the change in this world. And I think it's quite true, where and some of you touched on the agentic ecosystem, and his term for it was introducing, AI twins for basically every function or every job, every staff that you have. Not as to remove them, but that they are accelerated by a virtual twin, because you can build agents to be able to start to understand and string together support. So we are in particularly looking at big pockets like contact center, like relationship managers, and helping to uplift the customer experience and also the protect and safety agenda, because AI is just able to spot when humans get overloaded. But going back to what Jensen said, I think I'll push a bit further, where I think, and many of my peers in the industry and myself, when we speak and we gather around, we talk about what we're doing in AI, it's very use case. So I go back to how you phrased your question. It's very use case driven. What's the biggest use case? But the way Jensen framed it was, what is your AI backbone architecture? Because the vision he had was, as you do multiple use case, don't lose sight of the fact that you are architecting for intrinsically an AI operating system that can help support across operations, to fraud, to AML, to customer service, to your mobile app, to hyper-personalize, to marketing, right? And as we approach an agentic future where it gets more precise, that architecture vision still needs to be had to make sure that they are working coherently, and you will have a enterprise AI backbone that comes to that. So we are actively thinking both of very precise, because of obviously regulations and controls, very precise small language models that are task driven, to very small, controlled, and you can manage down the error and the hallucination down to a very acceptable degree with human interface. But at the same time, not losing of the fact that it is part of a much broader strategic architecture that you need to build, right, to bring the organization to the future. Yeah, I hope that was not too philosophical, but yeah.
Did you ask him for exclusive access to more GPUs?
Take a number, right?
He had a bag of them.
Yeah, exactly. So when he presented at UST, he said, giveaway time, right? And so everybody was, people like, yes, please.
I don't take more time, but he had a bag, and when we took it, there were mini chocolates shaped like GPUs, and they were giving out to their visitors.
Darn it, we want the real thing. We want the real thing.
Real story.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So actually, so thank you. But both you and Gary are architecture folk. So most people are not architecture folk. So I think what a lot of us are interested in, back to the use cases, is the front office or the back office. Because back to Sally's point, risk, right? So arguably, if you do it more on the back office side, it's less risky, right? Although depending which area you're working in. Can you give us a color in terms of some priority areas that in terms of use cases? Because I think that's what most of the audience can relate to a little bit more. Architecture is great, but yeah.
Sure. So I'm not an architect. I lead the commercial program. And the flavor of use case is, I was trying to explain that we do have live explorations and build across front to back, right? But always heavily with an expert in the loop, right? And the other part I didn't touch on is we're thinking really around what's the evaluation framework that drives competent measurement of how generative AI works. And when that happens, we'll be much more comfortable to go. But as I said, it's not front or back or middle or control. It is that in each of them, you establish your risk parameter and your go-to-market value in each of these respective silos, right? So that's how we are guided by. So we have a flagship program that looks across this range of opportunities. And I'm happy to say, regardless of fraud, credit risk, AML, underwriting, relationship managers and marketing, we have a portfolio of these that are under exploration, but all with a risk-based approach to them.
No, that's very fair, and I know from friends at HSBC, you are actually doing a lot right across the board, unlike others as well. So thank you very much. So Guillaume, love to hear what high priority use cases are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah. I'm going to, I don't want to darken too much the picture on AI, and I'm going to, I would say, stress a bit on two falsehoods on AI that, in fact, once done correctly, are clearly confirmed as totally false. One of the ideas that we have in mind is that AI is hallucinating all the time. Well, in fact, if you have the correct architecture on the correct technology and the responsible practice, you reach a level that is in fact what we call beyond the Bayesian threshold, which is beyond the human level. So human hallucinates also. And we can get now to ways of architecting that are reliable. And I have an example in this case. There's been an experimentation from an insurer in US whereby they did a full assessment of all the claims management. They wanted obviously to build a solution that was helping the operators, the analysts to be processing these claims. And they did, I would say, a historical review. And they realized that the AI was in fact more factual and more ethical and correct and by the book on the assessment of the claim. And they even had a situation where they had to go back to the case. And this is particularly important because when you look at some experimentations that have been, some of them are very famous, like an insurer in Shenzhen that managed to implement through the phone photo taking of a car accident, whereby you get the answer response in just a few hours through this AI processing different minutes on how much are going to be reimbursed. And this can be life-saving. Imagine what's been happening in California with the fires and so on. You can have to wait for months and years. Fortunately, I've had this situation in the past in my family, and I can tell you that every day you're waiting by the phone or your mailbox for the answer from the insurer. So finding ways to mitigate this limitation is really can be life-changing. I'm going to take another example, but this time in the health environment, slightly related also to insurance, whereby there's been a realization that they've done a blind test between patients who have been given feedback on the prognostic by humans, doctor, professional, and by AI. And overwhelmingly, the response was better on the AI side. Why so? Because AI doesn't have a bad day. AI doesn't have any downtime or doesn't have any issue. If it is correctly, I would say, designed in order to answer empathically, then it can totally provide the right support and coaching for the patients and so on. So there's a huge upside there. Obviously, there are some bad ways, there are the right way, but we shouldn't lose the fact that there is a lot of positive that is to be reached there. And there's been already some successful success story. And obviously, claims insurance is top of our mind, but we can go through all the value chain.
Okay, great. No, thanks for that. Again, as you've heard, I think Guillaume is a big cheerleader for AI. So I won't ask you a PDU level. So I want to turn very briefly, and then I want to actually remind the audience we're going to open up for questions. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to chime in. Sandbox. So we've touched upon the sandbox already. I think it's great that I think both Jiahao and Gary both are participating in that. Maybe you can touch upon some of the projects that you've got involved to give a flavor of some of the things to come.
Yeah. So just for those, just a quick recap of the sandbox, right? So phase 1, 15 use cases, 10 banks, and 4 tech partners. So Alibaba, we're very fortunate to be one of the tech partners, working with a top 3 note issuing bank and also a mid-sized bank, right? So quite interesting across sort of 3 domains. So using digital avatar to transform. So this is more the front office part, and it's and I think the reason they looked at digital avatar was also sort of got into the digital twin, right? So how does some of the bank's management and the theme of digital avatar that they're using is to promote fraud awareness, actually. So very helping customers to understand and to be aware what are some of these different potential fraudulent activities, right? Or spots to watch out for, SMS, etc. The second one was on ML. So the ML one was more on helping the AML operations functions to automate or fast track turning structured and unstructured transactional data into a suspicious transaction report. So it's actually really leveraging that. What I think is a key strength of large language model, right, which is to help you understand the information, right, and then turn it into a sort of a meaningful output. Right? So that's the second one. And then the third one was on the theme of fraud. So fraud, two types of fraud. One is document fraud, right? As part of the lending process. So a bank typically gets different forms of statements, income, again, potentially utilities or utility bills. So how do you use AI, large language model, to understand those input so that you reduce the human overhead in terms of reviewing this documentation before then you obviously trust the input to then provide a lending outcome. So that's one part of the fraud. The second part I touched on it slightly earlier, entity theft. Right? So again, how do you use, I call it simplistically, how do you use AI to fight AI? Because to be honest, you may have seen on the news just recently, a lady in the UK, I believe, Brad Pitt. Like, I honestly thought the quality of the deepfake images were not the best. But having said that, we should not assume that everyone can spot a deepfake photo. Now, we actually run this little game that we do at all of the conferences that we have, of just randomly generated deepfake photos that we ask the customers to just try, right? Just like, it's almost like that tool that you do swipe left, swipe right. Which one's deepfake, which one's not. And you'll be surprised that actually a lot of people cannot tell what is. I actually think it's just as complicated or just as easy to sort of get hit with a phishing attack, actually. It's just another form, right? Because they're pretending it's clearly social engineering, just that person happens to really like Brad Pitt. I'm sure if they put my face on it, she's not going to respond, right? But is it Brad Pitt? Yes, that's absolutely. So, so I think that's just part of it. So yesterday, there was a briefing from HKMA and some report on the expectation. Interestingly, I think a lot of people, including ourselves, thought it's like 6 months from when we start to do the briefing, but I thought it's actually 6 months since you guys seen the press release. So 6 months, it means it's the end of the phase one. But actually now, a lot of banks are now talking to us about phase two. Just phase one, we talked to about 15 banks, right? Maybe I had 30, 40 meetings, like in about a space of a month. But pretty much all talk about the same thing. How do I help them make money? How do I help them save money? How do I help them prevent losses? That's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Jiahao, can you give a color to some of the titles?
Sure, I'll try and keep it quick. I know we're running a bit late on time. Alluding to my previous response, we really tie it not to Star Trek or Star Wars, where the future no one's heard of, and we try and invent something that it's not ready yet. We tie our use cases to the bread and butter of the core concerns and operating model of the bank. And the good also HSBC is multi-business. We have global banking, we have retail, we have private bank, we have securities, and how we approached it was really amalgamate the key foundational solution capabilities, strategic foundational capabilities that can service across. So I'll talk to broadly three, and one would be staff augmentation, which I touched on, and what we call knowledge management is really foundational. I think that is the one that will apply across the regulator's office, the legal office, to any call center agent. Everyone would benefit from a capability like Generative AI to ingest and comprehend across a wide range of formats and domains of documents, of which large institutions have libraries and libraries and libraries of. how do you solve for multi-format, right? Problem to recognize across PDF and images and bars and charts and pie charts and Word, and then be able to apply the power of generative AI to come up with a coherent and non-hallucinating summary or education around that. And it could be around procedures, it could be around legal documents. So that's one that we think is pretty universal. I believe, it's not the sexiest, it doesn't sound, as I said, like Star Wars, but it will fundamentally benefit, across the entire population of a very large group. The second would be fraud, so fraud detection across multiple streams of media. And again, the vectors of attacks, as Gary touched on, they are quite multivariate. We have pictures of Brad Pitt, we have videos of your aunt or your grandmother, you have voice calls that sound like your cousin, and then you have emails, right, that sound, I don't know, from your who emails you these days, I don't know, but emails from someone you love. And we are approaching it from a multi-vector perspective, and how do we use the very human-like cognitive capability of generative AI to comprehend across a range of these different formats and detect fraud and attacks on our banking customers much more effectively. And again, there's an architectural challenge there that we gave ourselves as well, because all these different sources and formats of data are often held differently, and I'm sure many of you will agree. And here's an exercise where you bring them together and build an architecture that generative AI can consume across, right, and come out with a coherent response. The third will be something that we really want to shape and get feedback from HKMA. We call it something like one of our customer concierge type patterns, where we service and respond to customer queries by the millions, right? By the hundreds of millions across HSBC globally. And the power of generative AI to respond in a non-robotic manner compared to the chatbots of the previous era is something that again will benefit across a whole range of our operations. So how do we test that, right? Within a finite domain of customer knowledge, probably public data that they should already have access to, but enable a customer to comprehend our journeys, our FAQs, what they get from the bank, what support, where do they go for help, and have that on tap, right time, right place, with a very summarized answer that's immediately effective rather than trawl through 30 pages of fine print. That's something we're trying to solve with this third use case, which we think sounds simple, but is really to the core of how we want to support our customers and uplift the standards. Yeah. So that's the broad strokes of the three sort of domain areas we want to address with the sandbox. I'm quite excited about it.
Great, very structured thinking around how you're thinking about it really from a whole bank point of view, so thank you. So I'm going to now end the panel with what I call my crystal ball questions, okay? And then we're going to open up for any of the questions we have from the floor before we join for drinks. So one sentence only, okay guys, for each of the crystal ball questions. So the first one is, I'm not going to look at Star Trek or Star Wars, we're going to just look at 2030. So right, 5 years time, right? What do you think the biggest impact of AI will be in financial industry here in Hong Kong? Okay, this is question number one. Question number two is, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing financial institutions, especially with respect to responsible AI implementation? Okay, and then number three, this is where the fairy godmother comes in. What wish do you like, if there were a fairy godmother, what wish would you like to from the fairy godmother to help address that particular challenge? We'll start with you, Sally, if we may. Thank you. So number one, 2030 is the future, so not Star Trek, right? Number two, challenge, and then number three, fairy godmother.
One answer for three questions combined. Hope there will be more collaboration amongst the different regulators, even though most immediate to us is SMC, but because a lot of fund products are distributed through banks. So we also need to understand the philosophy and the approach of Hong Kong MA, so as to ensure a coherent approach.
Alas, Raymond has left, but we'll make sure he hears that. Gary.
So question one, so 2030, right? I think for me, it's, maybe simplistically, we don't actually explicitly mention about the word AI. It's just part of what we do. It's in there. I think that's my number one. Remind me of number two, number three again.
Challenge for responsible AI.
Yeah, oh, for sure, right? Challenge. I think it's going to really test us as a human. I think it's going to test human nature, to be honest, in terms of AI. Because, like I said, I think because AI is so. I'm not going to use the word disruptive, but it's the way it's helping us to rethink about the way we do things, right? So, if we as a human being are using it for the good, I think that's fantastic for all of us. But my worry is that, I don't know why Spider-Man popped up in my head, but like, with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm pro AI because I believe that I, as an individual, can use it well to serve what I want to do. But my worry is when many of us, maybe in a broad sense, have access to very affordable power, right? Affordable AI capability. Does that person change? Because it's much easier now. For example, I thought about, I do a lot of NTT fake work, right? And actually at one stage I thought about, I think I can make a lot more money doing deepfake, actually. It's so easy. So that, to me, that's the worry, and I'm not sure you can fix this by regulations. I'm not sure, right? But that's my, I don't have an answer to it, but that's my second one. And then the
Very good, another wish.
Set up my digital twin.
Oh, okay. For better, for worse. Very good. Yes, indeed.
People, I see the biggest impact in people, and again it's the cheating answer because HSBC has lots of people, and we have lots of customers. So the impact of AI will be on people. I think the technology is more ready than we think, we believe. The technology will always progress, but it's the people, and the pace of the people adopting, changing, setting the right policies that will feel the most material change. Similarly, we're very customer-centric. Our customers will feel a material change in how they do banking or they do insurance, right? By 2030 because of AI, right? I'll combine my second and third answer, challenge and very good mark, because that's what we show. I'll say standards. And standards is not a bad thing, right? You take, I don't know what's the answer, USB-C or, what a car emission standard to be sold in the EU. There are standards. And by having acceptable standards that liberates all participants to actually progress with the right guardrails, with the right directionality, and compete. And I believe the standards will come, but my wish list is that it will come faster, not in a constraining way, but in a way that allows, I think, broadly banking in Hong Kong to really become leaders globally in terms of deploying the impact, deploying AI and reaping the benefits of the impact.
Very good, thank you. Kia?
If I can make my sentence less than 1,000 words.
You had very long sentences, by the way, but anyway.
2030, I don't even know how this year is going to end at this place, but 2030, I guess the level of disruption is beyond what we would have thought about. We can see this in the creative industry, we can see this already in the writing and even code development. Disruption is not going to be only for the adults. We are all going to be affected. So I expect positives, but I also expect challenges. Transition to the next point, challenges. I'm not worried at all for the people who do AI. I'm not worried at all for those who are interested. I'm much more concerned for the people who don't use AI, to be honest. And I think that this is a topic that is so transformative that it might have a societal impact. And I think that this is a question that is not technological, much more societal or philosophical, but I'm slightly more concerned for the people who don't use that. And there are many who just stop at GPT 3.5 or digital version. How to change this? Well, obviously, I think that going step by step, on making sure that there are some guardrails and that we stay with a strong foot on the ground, on making sure that I would say the most critical risks are covered, but also stay abreast, and I stress this point, of the innovation, because you might be thinking about something that is already 2 years old, and it's important to stay up to date. Yeah.
Great, thank you. You started with the lawyer, we'll end with the lawyer as well, Rafi.
It's very quick. 2 or 3, we still have our jobs, but it will be very different. Challenges, it's not a challenge, but I think we need all pieces of the puzzle to make it work, not just regulations, not just the government taking the stance. We need capital, we need talent, we need adoption, and technical expertise. So we need everything for that to work. And my wish list, I think it's for AI, I think it's the same for different jurisdictions. So it's not just to think about ourselves, how it works, how we want it to be, but we need to have that, keep that in mind, is for the AI framework to work for jurisdiction, it needs to be reciprocal and can go global. One important point, I think, is about data and respecting the data sovereignty of different parts of the world. Find a way that works, and then we can develop as an international hub for AI.
Super, thank you. And at least for me, I keep thinking about in 2030 the future of work, right? What will the bank look like? What will so I work in the law, so the law profession is very worried about this. I work in education. Education is really worried about this. So what is the future of work? In terms of the challenge, I think how do we properly put the human in the loop in relation to this? In terms of responsibility, taking responsibility and using, and then the wish of sorts will be about for everybody to engage in their own way, right? And again, and I think it's linked to the Guillaume's earlier point, everybody in the room here actually is some way engaged, but there are lots of people out there not, right? So how do they, because society is going to change, regardless of whether they do so, we need to try to engage and bring everyone together. With that, can I open the floor to any questions? Any burning questions? Otherwise you can catch everywhere for drinks. Any burning questions? If not, yes, Nitesh. Maybe I'll run over with the mic. Here we go.
Thank you for your insights. I've got a question. So how do you see the marriage of AI with other technologies, for example, ENT?
Good question. Any takers?
Yeah, I'll take a stab. I think where it's going to marry is a few things, right? So one, I think DLT, there's a lot of benefits around the transparency of the transactions that are happening now. But at the same time, it requires actually a lot of analytics that actually goes behind what all the transactions that are happening across the, let's just call it the chain for the simplistic view. At the same time. So I think that's going to, it will be able to have leverage, right? In particular in actually what I call the AML context of the DLT. I think the second part is that I actually can see that, if we take DLT at a more sort of global level and look at rewarding the participants of DLT, and I sort of link that back up to people having access or providing access of computational power, right? So you think about almost like what happens in a day when GPU becomes so affordable that there's a lot of people that can afford GPU, but actually providing it back into the DLT transactions, I think that in itself is also going to trigger potentially additional computational power that AI at a mass scale will require. So it might actually change the dynamics, what I call the economics of AI, right? Because I think there will be a bias of who have access to good AI based on how much computational power they can access to. So I think that's going to potentially disrupt that from my perspective. And hopefully, I have a firm belief that AI and DLT, to some extent, will help level out the playing field, right? It's about giving more controls back into the people who's got, the organizations to have access to the voting power, to have access. So it's going to actually, and I think that's the key benefit of AI as well. It's AI actually helps those that may not be the biggest player in the world context to actually narrow down, right? Narrow the divide. And I think that's actually a very, very important part of what AI will bring. And I believe that AI and DLT actually has that as I think inherent value that it brings to the table. Yeah.
Great. It was a tough one for the end of the evening. If there's nothing further, can you please all put your hands together? I learned a lot from this wide-ranging panel. I hope you did too. So please, thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. And then we may take a little photo amongst us, and then I'll pass the mic over to Kaz, perhaps to end. No, it's good. So I have the pleasure of closing the events then. Once again, thank you also very much for being here. We're really excited, the FinTech Association, to actually launch the council that we, and because we believe that AI is so important for our society, our whole world, very important for Hong Kong, but also very important for the financial institutions. So if you can fill in this feedback form, we always like feedback, user design thinking, right? And once again, thank you very much to our host, HSBC, for having us. We will have some drinks at the back. Please stay on and chat and mingle more. And please be part of our journey as we all work together on the different parts of the ecosystem to improve AI and finance in Hong Kong. Thank you very much.